What is more stressful than renovating a house? What about renovating a house while taking care of a newborn? Or what about renovating a dilapidated house while taking care of a newborn? And trying to keep protesters off your property. Does that sound stressful enough? Well, not if you ask Camden Leeds and Heather Johnson, the husband and wife duo who are making a splash in Pittsburgh's historic North Side neighborhood. Camden and Heather enjoyed restoring their once condemnable shell of a house into a contemporary haven, so much so, neighborhood petitions trying to stop them and all, that they are planning on doing it again. We're starting a modern movement in the North Side, Heather says of their plans. We're the talk of the neighborhood. When Camden and Heather met and eventually married, it was a match made in design aesthetic heaven. The two have very similar tastes and knew exactly what they were looking for when they began canvassing the streets of Camden's North Side neighborhood 8 years ago to find a house of their own. I grew up in the suburbs and I would never go back, ever, Heather explains of her love of city living. You couldn't pay me to go back, but we kept going into these renovated houses that were updated, and all we wanted to do was tear them apart and start all over. It didn't make sense to buy a nice house just to gut it, so we decided we needed a dilapidated house. And Heather doesn't sugarcoat it when she says, we were asking to see the crappiest houses in Pittsburgh. Camden and Heather immediately knew when they spotted what would eventually become their home. It had been abandoned for many, many years. There was no way you could live in the house in its condition. Well, maybe if you were a squatter, Heather describes. According to Camden, it took a definite leap of faith to see past all the years of neglect and envision all the possibilities. It's hard to see the end result when you're looking at such a mess, he explains. It was scary, Heather adds. It was very stressful to do what we did, but we always knew it was the right decision for us. So for 9 months, the couple worked tirelessly to rehab their house back into a home while living off-site in a rental. Once the home was functional, with things like running water and electricity, the family, which includes now 18-year-old daughter Maddie and now 3-year-old son Kingston, moved into their home for the final 3 months of the renovation. During this time, Camden and Heather consider themselves lucky enough to have come across contact information for Brian Seifert and Nicole Santella of Take Pride Construction Concrete Zen. We knew we wanted concrete countertops, Heather explains of their initial internet search that led her to Seifert. When Brian came to see the house, we realized he also worked as a contractor, so it ended up being a perfect fit. We designed our house to include concrete floors, walls, and countertops. The house was full of trash, literal trash when we started, Santella describes of their initial days on the job site. We cleared it out, though, and began to bring Camden and Heather's vision to light. Santella describes Camden and Heather as a very creative couple. The muted color scheme they chose is a great backdrop for the punches of color they have chosen in their finishes and decor. They were also very adamant about reusing as much original material from the existing house as possible. This included reusing original trim, sealing existing brick walls, and finding new uses for some old pieces. The original foyer has marble flooring, but it was really beat up, Heather explains. But we were able to salvage a piece to use as the countertop in our downstairs bathroom. We also took out a wall with 2 pocket doors. One of those pocket doors is now the door to our downstairs bath, and the other is the headboard in my daughter's bedroom. While they did open up a lot of walls to make the space more open, Camden and Heather maintained the original floor plan of the home. Reusing existing materials cuts down on waste, Heather says of their decision to recycle. Plus, it has the added bonus of creating a nice aesthetic that you can't find anywhere else. Santella explains that while the concrete used in Camden and Heather's home was created specifically for their project, it is still a very eco-friendly building material. Concrete is a heavy building material made from a mixture of broken stone or gravel, sand, cement, and water. It begins in a liquid form, so it can be spread or poured into any shape that then hardens to a stone-like finish. Unlike granite or marble countertops, concrete is not mined from the earth. This makes it a much more environmentally sound product. Concrete is such a great material because we have the ability to completely customize it, Santella says of her work with Concrete Zen. We could create a countertop, floor, furniture, or sink. It could be anything. We will take any excuse we can to make a functioning piece of art. And that is exactly what Santella and her team did in Camden and Heather's kitchen, creating a piece of art out of the family's countertop. They knew they wanted concrete countertops and they knew they wanted wine storage in the kitchen. So we decided to combine the two, Santella explains. Their countertops and wine racks were cast as one piece. The modern concrete kitchen is completed with white cabinetry and concrete floors. Perhaps the most dramatic transformation of Camden and Heather's home happened on the front facade, where the once traditional brick row house was overhauled into a contemporary address. Heather explains that when they originally purchased the home, they were under the assumption they fell into the National Historic District, which would limit the transformation they could make to the exterior of their home. But after making a few phone calls, they learned that their house doesn't fall in the National Historic District, but in their local historic district instead. When we found out that the local historic district didn't have any restrictions on what we could do with the front of our house, we scrapped our plan to use brick and went with a more modern feel, Heather explains. The exterior had to be completely restructured because the front of the house was bowing, Santella describes. We decided to use cement panels instead of traditional stone or brick. To say their design decision received mixed reviews would be a vast understatement. The neighbors went crazy, Heather says of their ordeal. People started a petition, the police had to be called. It was crazy. People either love it or hate it, she adds of her home after surviving the ordeal with some of her neighbors. It was all worth it in the end, though. We have people walk by all the time and knock on our window to give us a thumbs up and say, "We love your house." So we must be doing something right.